3:47 a.m., a veterinarian woke up to all the animals on her property doing something she had never witnessed in 35 years of practice. Cows crying as if they were losing their calves, horses trembling with fear for no apparent reason, dogs howling while staring at the sky, and the most disturbing part, they all did this at the same time, as if they had received a signal that only they could perceive. What happened at that property in Montana wasn't an isolated case, and what you'll discover in the next few minutes may completely change your perception. Because the animals, they know something we haven't noticed yet. Maria Helena Santos, a veterinarian for 35 years in rural Montana, never believed in supernatural signs. Daughter of a pastor, she grew up hearing about prophecies, but her scientific training always spoke louder. Until that dawn in September 2023, when something happened on her rural property that would forever change her perception about the end times. Maria Helena woke up that morning with her heart racing. It wasn't the alarm clock. There were still 3 hours before her usual time. It was something different, something that made her entire body go into a state of alert, as if an invisible danger was approaching. The sound came from everywhere at once, from the barn where her 15 dairy cows normally slept silently, from the paddock where the horses rested, from the chicken coop that always stayed quiet during the night, and especially from her 4 dogs, who had never in 10 years howled like this. She got up, put on her boots, and went out to check. What she saw left her paralyzed. Every animal on her property was in extreme agitation. But there was nothing, absolutely nothing, that justified that behavior. There was no approaching storm, no smell of predators, no strange noises other than those the animals themselves were making. But there was something more disturbing. All of them, without exception, looked in the same direction, toward the sky, as if they were seeing something she couldn't see. It was as if they were trying to warn me about something, Maria Helena would say later, as if they knew a secret I didn't have access to. For the next 2 hours, she stayed there, watching. The animals gradually calmed down, but maintained that constant vigilance behavior. And when the sun rose, something even stranger happened. They returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. Maria Helena could have forgotten the episode, treated it as an atypical night. But something inside her, perhaps the memory of her pastor father's words, made her write everything down in a notebook. Date, time, behavior of each animal, weather conditions, everything. She didn't know it, but that note would be just the first of dozens of identical records. 3 weeks later, it happened again. Exactly at the same time, 3:47, all the animals began to vocalize at the same time, creating a symphony of despair that echoed through the rural property like a collective lament. Maria Helena, this time prepared, went out with her cell phone and recorded everything. The audio is disturbing. Moose that sound like human crying, neighing that seems like warning screams, barks that more resemble howls of lament. And behind it all, a silence in the environment that shouldn't exist. No crickets, no wind, as if nature itself was holding its breath. She began to research and discovered she wasn't alone. In veterinary forums, identical reports appeared almost daily. Farmers from all over America reporting similar episodes, domestic and farm animals presenting inexplicable vocal behaviors, always at specific nighttime hours, always looking at the sky. But it was when Maria Helena found the report of a pastor in rural Texas that everything began to make sense to her. The man described exactly the same situation, but added information that reminded her of her father's sermons. It's as if they were announcing something, like those animals that Noah gathered before the flood. The biblical connection was undeniable. In Genesis, animals were the first to perceive the approach of divine judgment. They entered the ark not by coincidence, but because they possessed a spiritual sensitivity that humans had lost. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me. Genesis 6:13. The animals knew, they always knew. The second pattern Maria Helena noticed was even more disturbing than the first. Her animals, especially the horses, began to demonstrate migratory behavior that made no sense. During the day, she found them always in the same location on the pasture, the highest point of the property, all facing east, motionless like statues, as if they were waiting for something. When she tried to move them, they resisted in a way she had never seen. It wasn't stubbornness. It was determination, as if they had a mission. She researched again and discovered alarming scientific reports. Migrations of wild animals were happening out of season around the world, birds flying in directions contrary to their natural migratory routes, fish appearing in waters where they should never be, mammals abandoning their territories for no apparent reason. But the most impressive thing was the direction. They all moved toward the east, exactly the direction Jesus mentioned in Matthew 24:27. For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. East, the same direction her horses looked religiously every day. Maria Helena began timing these episodes and discovered something that kept her awake. They were becoming more frequent. What happened once a month became every 2 weeks. Then every week, it was as if it was counting down to something. The third behavior almost cost the lives of Maria Helena's animals. For 3 consecutive days, none of her animals wanted to eat, neither water nor food. They simply refused everything, staying in a state of voluntary fasting. That defied all survival instincts. As a veterinarian, she knew this was biologically impossible. Animals don't collectively fast without serious medical reason. She examined each of them. They were healthy, no signs of disease, no indicators of poisoning or parasites, but they simply wouldn't eat. It was then that she remembered a biblical passage her father always quoted about the end times, in Joel 1:18. How do the beasts groan? The herds of cattle are perplexed, because they have no pasture. Yea, the flocks of sheep are made desolate. The prophecy spoke of a time when the animals themselves would enter, a state of lamentation and fasting, sensing the approaching divine judgment. On the 4th day in the morning, she found all the animals drinking water and eating normally. But there was something different in their eyes, a kind of deep sadness, as if they knew something terrible was coming. She discovered later that, during those 3 days of her animals fasting, farmers from 5 American states reported exactly the same behavior. Collective food refusal without medical explanation, followed by sudden return to normal. The synchronization was impossible to be coincidence. The 4th pattern was what most frightened Maria Helena, because she recognized in it a behavior she had only seen once in her life. During a forest fire that almost devastated her region 10 years ago, the animals began to group defensively, forming protection circles without any visible threat. The cows formed a circle with the calves in the center. The horses stood side by side, flanks touching flanks. The dogs positioned themselves strategically around the property like sentinels. It was war preparation behavior. But war against what? Maria Helena spent nights observing these groupings and noticed they always happened when the moon was in a certain phase, precisely the new moon, when the darkness of night was total. She remembered Jesus' words in Luke 21:25, "And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring." The animals were preparing for something, and that something was coming on a moonless night. The 5th behavior was discovered by accident. Maria Helena noticed that her animals began to avoid certain areas of the property, always the same areas. for no apparent reason. Curious, she conducted a test. She brought a compass to these locations and discovered something disturbing. At all these points, the compass spun wildly, as if the Earth's magnetic field was being distorted. The animals could sense these magnetic anomalies and avoided them instinctively. She researched and discovered recent scientific studies showing that Earth's magnetic field was weakening at an alarming rate, with polarity reversals occurring at various points on the planet. In the Bible, in Isaiah 13:13, it is written, "Therefore I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall remove out of her place, in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger." The earth was literally moving from its magnetic place, and animals were the first to perceive it. The last two behaviors happened simultaneously and were the most disturbing of all. First, all animals developed the habit of stopping their activities several times a day to stare at the sky, always in the same direction, always with the same expression of expectation, as if they were waiting for someone. Second, they developed extreme nocturnal restlessness, especially in the hours before dawn, precisely the period the Bible calls the morning watch, when Jesus promised to return. Maria Helena began waking systematically between 3 and 6 a.m. with the sound of animals moving, walking, as if they were preparing to receive someone very important. It was then that she completely understood what was happening. The animals weren't just sensing the rapture, they were preparing for it. In the last entry of her notebook, Maria Helena wrote, "Today marks 6 months since it all began. The behaviors are happening daily now. My animals live in constant expectation, as if they knew something grand was about to happen. And I finally understood. They're not afraid, they're waiting. Just like the animals ran to Noah before the flood, my animals are preparing for God's next great event on earth." God's creatures maintained the spiritual sensitivity that we humans lost. They can perceive the approach of the supernatural. And if they're behaving like this, it's because it's really coming. Jesus said in Matthew 24:36 that no one knows the day or hour. But he also said in Matthew 16:3 that we should know how to discern the signs of the times. The animals are already discerning. The question is, are we paying attention? Maria Helena Santos continues living on her rural property in Montana. Her animals continue presenting these 7 behaviors, now almost constantly. And she's no longer alone. Thousands of people around the world are reporting the same patterns in their animals. The question that won't be silenced is, if God's creatures can sense the approach of the rapture, why we, who were made in His image, still don't perceive the signs? Maybe it's time to stop looking only at newspaper headlines and start paying attention to what God's own creation is trying to tell us. If you have animals at home, observe them more carefully in the coming days. If you know someone from a rural area, ask if they've noticed anything different. And if you're still not sure if Jesus is really coming back, maybe it's time to stop doubting and start preparing. Because if the animals are right, we don't have much time. Leave in the comments, have you noticed any strange behavior in animals around you? Do you believe they can really sense things we can't perceive? And more importantly, are you prepared for what might be coming? If this video touched your heart in some way, it's because it needed to reach you today. Share with someone who also needs to know this truth. And subscribe to the channel, but only if you have the courage to know the whole truth about the times we're living in. Until the next video. And remember, the signs are everywhere. You just need to know where to look.